Okay, hi. Greetings and welcome to the Museum of the American Indian. I am the current board president, and I'm really happy that all of you came. And this is our first annual event with the title of Mother Earth Speaks. And all of the presenters here today are not surprisingly human. We are all very much part of Mother Earth. And they are going to speak for Mother Earth today as best it is possible. So I really have actually a personal motivation for having this. We're hoping this fundraiser is going to bring in a few more things. Not only, we just got this brand new PA system. We have video happening here, but I don't have a teleprompter, and I really need one. So I'm hoping somebody is going to fund that. So. So if we look around, there's tons more happening in reality than what humans do. A problem is in the last 400 years, due to advancement of humanity and particularly their technologies, there has been a lot of change that has occurred, and it has disrupted the balance of the environment. And that is what is so problematical now. And for thousands of years, humans interacted with the earth, and they took care of it. It took care of them. And in fact, right here, you are on a past village site of the Miwok Indians. So it was a full site here. And for thousands of years, they were here. And just a little quick history. About 1966, there was a group of archaeological students at Novato High School. And they saw the development happening here and came through, and they actually found artifacts here, went to their teacher then went to the city went to the state, etc., etc. And that is why Miwok Park is here, and the only reason it is here, because those students found those artifacts. And then it was preserved. Now there's the museum. We actually became a formal entity in 1967, and so what happens next year is that we're going to have our 50th birthday, and we're very excited about that. We will have a major event here, probably run for a full weekend. So there's also a lot of change that has gripped this land in the last 5 to 10 years, maybe more. A lot more people have started caring about the environment, and in particular they've started caring about climate. And that is really new, and that is a major change, at least from my perspective. I began getting involved in working for climate issues 34 years ago, and founded one of the first organizations, grassroots organizations in the country that worked on climate issues. Now, a bunch of our science was wrong back then, but so be it. We tried to bring the interest to the public, and you can imagine how well it went over 35 years ago. It did not. So for me, I have seen the changes over time, and it is wonderful for me to see how much more interest there is in climate. It is just terrific. So we're in a real crisis right now, and it's all related to climate change. And from our perspective, we need to relearn the respect and reverence for the earth that indigenous peoples have. And we need to proactively and politically directly confront abuses that can be confronted. And we need to change the way we do things. So today we are providing all of you with perhaps some new paths to pursue or think about or look at. And we desire to allow Mother Earth to speak. And the people following will do that for Mother Earth. And perhaps we will all be more united in purpose and action as a result of this. So here's how the program is. We're going to begin and end with Native Wisdom. Colleen Hicks, our executive director, is going to introduce Victoria Grace Canby to open the presentations. And then Sally Evans, another board member and an archaeologist, is going to introduce our first main speaker, Mike Newland. And then after that, there will be a question and answer period. Then we are going to take a break for food, drink, bathrooms. Incidentally, there are 2 bathrooms in the museum, one on the lower floor, one on the second floor, and there are bathrooms across the way. And then when we're done with that, I am going to introduce Josh Fryday, and he will give us a bunch of the political activity that is going on in this country. It's very up to date. This is going to be terrific for us to listen to. And then we are going to close out with Robert Baggio. Baggio. Is he here yet? I haven't seen him. Well, hopefully we're going to close with him. If not, you're on again. No, I'm kidding. So, all right. So, Colleen, please come introduce.
Hey, thank you. Us short people. Don't laugh, Nick. That's good. That's fine. That's fine. It's not that short. Thank you.
We just got this too, and it took us a half an hour to get it operating.
OCO, which is hello in Cherokee, and thank you for coming to this event. We always enjoy to have people to come and learn and listen about Native wisdom. And I would like to welcome Nick Tippon, who is a Federated Indian tribal member and elder. Thank you for coming. And all the speakers, we're very grateful that you would take your time and come and talk to people that want to learn more. One of the things that we teach at our classes is it isn't always about what the problems are, but we're so removed so much in our daily life from nature. You know, you think about, we always wear clothes, we're indoors, we're in a car, we're in a house, we're in a building. And for Native people, there's no Costco or Target. These are your resources. And so, of course, you would have an impetus to take care of your resource. And I think there's been too much of a disconnect between where our resources really come from. So we're very grateful. It's too bad that it had to come to a place, you know, of this sort of dire straits for people to really wake up again. I actually grew up in one of the most toxic sites in America, a lead smelter mining town in northern Idaho. And so I know firsthand what can happen, you know, and we all use metals. So, you know, there's no primary smelters left in the United States. They're in China, South America, maybe one in Canada. So we have some real issues in terms of how we live. And I hope these talks will about reconnecting with our real sources. So I'm going to introduce Victoria. She's going to come and she's going to talk about who she is and where she's coming from. But she's done some work with the exhibits here and is considering to be a board member. So we're really excited about that. So thank you. And thank you for coming.
You see what my job is to do. That?
I think so. Hello? Yeah, that's good. Should be good.
Oh.
I have to get used to talking to Mike. I'm not always. I usually am just projecting across a classroom to kids. So I'll get used to this. Anyhow, hi, I'm Victoria. Victoria Grace Canby, and thank you for having me here today. And I'm an activist, an artist, and student and scholar, and I'm here to give a little bit of my knowledge of Native perspectives and Native philosophy. My mother was full-blood Dene from the Navajo Nation. My tribe is Nakai Dene, which is Mexican clan, and Ashi, which is Salt. And that's one of the ways that when you meet a Navajo, they're going to identify themselves with their clan, because that's how you know who your family is and if you're family. Like, I was just at Berkeley at some Native symposium, and I met a woman who happened to be a cousin of mine on my Ashi side. So that's how you kind of get to know your family, and you're always finding new family as you're going to new places. So I was born in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And when I was a year old, my dad's a Native Marin person. He was born in Santa Fe, and he was living in New Mexico and met my mother. And after a year, they moved out here. And so I was raised in Marin County. And my mother, felt very torn from being away from her indigenous tribe. So she found community out here and was often among the Native tribes around here. going to big times and going to events with California Indians, and brought me up with a really strong sense of understanding that I am in their home and respect for the California Indian tribes around this area. So, having that knowledge, it's, you always kind of put their wisdom first and kind of respect where their presence in our environment around. And through my studies, as I've come to when I was going to college and getting my bachelor's in art history up at Sonoma State, I had a friend I've been friends with for years, which is Edward Willey. I don't know if anybody knows Edward, but he's an amazing man. He's a brilliant painter, sculptor, basket weaver, and he's also a regalia specialist specifically for Pomo tribe. And he and I had been friends for many years, and I was talking to him about learning about some of these skills. Even though they're not my tribe, I felt very connected with them. So I started what's been over 5 years now, being an intern and a student of his, and along with another friend of mine who's an artist. We've been learning from Edward to make cordage, to grind shells, to process feathers, and a lot of that you can see. While we started working with Edward, he actually got a pretty substantial grant. And so the product of the grant is upstairs. You guys, if you have some time, check out the museum, go upstairs in the small room in the back. It's going to be up for a while, I believe. It's a permanent exhibit. So you can see their process involved in what we were working on. And this is years in the making. Some of those, the grant was over a 2-year span, but we had been working on some of those pieces for quite some time. We worked on collecting materials, cultivating a landscape, processing materials. A lot of what we did was very experimental, because a lot of the knowledge that was needed to make some of these pieces was knowledge that hasn't been passed down, that was lost, or it's hard to find the connections with the right people who could tell you how to do some of these things. When you look at We would study archives, and we went to different museum exhibits and studied the collections that, like the Herbst Museum in Berkeley, studied the collections that they had and examined those pieces and looked at how things were tied, how things were processed and made and knotted and constructed and put together. And through this process of these years of working on all these things together, I started to understand a certain aspect of my own indigeneity and my ancestry that I didn't quite connect with before until I was able to do all this stuff. And that is the deep symbiotic relationship and connection to Mother Nature that Native people have and had, and the potential for what was, there before colonization. There were so many moments that I was deeply moved, and a couple of them I'll share with you. One is when we make cordage. So, we go to the store, we buy rope. It's like $3 for like a ball of rope. Makes it really easy when you're making a necklace to do it like that. And that's how a lot of tribes right now are, making their regalia, by using manufactured and often synthetic materials. We were making all these things from scratch. So we're going out to a site that is off 101. It is an old site that's been, used for thousands of years. Native people have been going to this place. And we're collecting right there. And, we're collecting right when there's like 101 and honking and freeway and it's busy and we're looking over our shoulder and there's cars buzzing by, but we're in this spot that has been loved and treated and respected and prayed over for thousands of years. And as we're taking these plants, we're talking to them, we're noticing them, we're looking at them, and we're thinking, okay, well, there's a patch right here. We're not going to take all the juicy ones. We're only going to take one out of every 4 or 5 plants, because you don't want to take everything. You want to take only what you need, and you want to leave something for the future generations. And as you're taking them, you're also cleaning out the area, which I don't know if anybody's familiar with, but a lot of the knowledge of the native California Indians is that they were tending the wild. So, there was things like controlled burns, and there was really like understanding the landscape and keeping certain plants at bay and keeping other plants growing. And it also depended on what the native people needed, as well as what was going to be good for the environment around in the landscape. And so we cleaned out a lot of invasive species as we were working on this little plot, as we were gathering. And we also left offerings there. And a common thing is to bring like a bead or some plant medicine, or to leave a song, so that deep reciprocity, that understanding of nature, and that constant thankfulness is something that it became not just something that I know about, but it's something that I do. It became more a part of my daily life and how I relate with my world around me and my own garden. I go into my own garden now and I look at the plants that people go buy Roundup for, to put poison like glyphosate in our land. And you look at those plants, and a lot of those plants we call weeds are actually medicine, like plantain is totally good. If you get really bit by a bug, you can use plantain to take out the poisons and toxins. So it's understanding your landscape and looking at your landscape in a totally different light. Another great moment I had with Edward, who's like a phenomenal teacher, and his ears are probably ringing right now because I've been talking about him all day. But he teaches a class through the MAPOM program. I don't know if anybody's familiar with it, but if you aren't, I would look it up. It's through College of Marin. It's they teach classes on California Indian Studies as a certification. I'm working on my certification, and I took a class with Edward on basket weaving. And sorry, I have a little bit of sore throat, but he teaches a class. It's a 2-day course from 9 to 4. And in that course, what he didn't tell us is that we were making earrings, because there was no way we were going to actually be able to make a basket in that amount of time. And we ended on 2 days, like that big of a piece of basket. So it was itty bitty tiny little thing. But the process involved was so humbling and so grounding while we were doing this. We're talking, we're communicating, we're socializing. But we're also delicately working on these sedge. Sedge was the plant we were working with. We're working on these sedge pieces. And the first day, the pieces were about 6 inches long. And you have to process them. And it takes all day. And I think we ended up with like 4 pieces about this long. And when we started just weaving the basket towards the end of the day. And the next day, Edward took us out, and if anybody's ever been to the Miwok village, out at Cooley Loco and Point Reyes, there's a native plants garden that's actually there. And it needs some love for sure, but it's in there, and there's still plants that are thriving in there. And one of the plants is the sedge plant. And the sedge patch was kind of suffering, but we went and did some caretaking like we had done at the dog bane. And Edward went and dug down into the ground between these plants. And what happens with the sedge plant is that there's a mother plant, and then there's a child plant, and between the 2 plants there grows a rhizome, which is the connection. It's how it gives birth. It's kind of like the umbilical cord between the 2 plants. So we dig down, and he finds this piece. And he goes in and he cuts it in a way that the plants are separated and now can both grow on their own and thrive on their own, as well as, they can continue, but he takes this piece and then reburies it, So this little piece of sedge that we harvested has to be, at that moment, the bark needs to be taken off. It needs to be split into 2. And then after that, it has to sit on a shelf for an entire year before you ever weave with it. So the amount of forethought and dedication to making just a simple basket sedge can hold water, is going to hold the water for a community. It takes a deep relationship and knowledge with that plant to know that little piece is going to be what you're going to use, and that you're going to keep those plants healthy because you need them to grow and make more rhizomes so that they can continue to provide for you so you can make the things that you need. So this cyclical relationship, this symbiotic relationship, is so vital and is so important. And what, as a community and as a world and as a nation, as we get bigger and bigger and commoditize and industrialize, all this happens, we forget that kind of relationship. And through all of that process that I keep working with Edward on, every time I walk away with this centered feeling, it not only feeds my brain with what I know, what I learned to do as a skill, as a primitive skill, but as well as it feeds my soul. And I think a lot about, I go to New Mexico a lot, and I've been, through learning with Edward, I've felt the need to definitely connect more with my tribe. So I go every year and spend about 3 weeks to a month learning from my family how to butcher sheep and weave and do all the other things that we do. And I'm, researching on how to make hogans, which is my native structure. And so I go out there and I learn from them. And I try to do the best I can to continue on this knowledge to my son and do the best I can to be respectful and knowledgeable about the landscape that I live in as well as the landscape out there. So, the more connected I am, the more I feel my environment around me, I feel it suffer. And I also go out and I see my tribe and I see the pain and I see the disconnect from the natural environment around them. And I see that sickness pervasive in a lot of Native tribes. And I can see it in a bigger picture among community. So my overall message and thought about this when I was asked to come speak is I really think I was listening to Winona LaDuke and John Trudell. So those are some scholars that I love. And they always talk about how if we look at ourselves, and we always think of the Native perspective, like we think of Native North America perspective of this real deep connection with nature. But Native and Indigenous perspectives don't just exist within North America. They exist all over the world. And there's Native perspectives all in every country and every land. And all of us have Indigenous and Native backgrounds. And if we all tune back into our ancestry and look back to the time when our ancestors all connected with plants and the medicine around them, if we all listen to that, we could maybe start to heal and start to bring back some healing. And if we respect the Indigenous communities that we have now and listen to their wisdom, maybe we'll be able to make some change. And I really pray for that. That's my everyday prayer. So I just wanted to impart a little of my knowledge. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. I'm Sally Evans. I'm a board member of the museum here. And I'm going to introduce Mike Newlin, who's over there still working away on his curious contraption.
I'm not going to do it for back. No, I'm going to move the stuff over. I need a volunteer.
Great. Well, Mike Newlin is a professional archaeologist from Sonoma State University, and he is a tireless leader on addressing issues involving our cultural heritage and climate change. Mike is a member of the State Historic Resource Commission's Archaeological Resource Committee and a past president of the Society for California Archaeology. And over the years, the past several years, he has made it his mission to see that California's archaeological sites that are most threatened by climate change, those located along the coast and the estuaries, are at a minimum recorded before they are impacted by sea level rise and other impacts of climate change. He has worked and rallied with archaeologists and Native Americans throughout the state in this effort, including some of us here today. Mike was also recently appointed to the Society for American Archaeology's 8-member Climate Change Task Force. In this position, he helps to develop national policy and advises on site identification and the treatment of climate change impacts to our significant cultural resources. I feel very privileged to have Mike here today with us. And I have a feeling from what's going on behind me that we're going to have a very interesting and exciting presentation to come. So thank you for being here.
Thing about it. And I was giving a presentation down in Santa Cruz, and I was showing them projections of what sea level rise was going to look like, which was it was going to take out most of downtown Santa Cruz, including the Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk. If you look at a 5 to 6 foot sea level rise, that's all going to go, right? And talk a little louder. Okay, all right. So there was an archaeological society I was talking to, and so we were talking about different solutions. And somebody said, "Well, why don't you're just going to need to survey the whole coastline then?" And I went, "Bah, that's crazy." And then I walked out there going, "That's actually exactly right. That's what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to survey the whole coastline." And that's just the archaeological hat. I mean, imagine what the botanical and the biological people have to think about. And so at that time, I was rotating into being the president of the Society for California Archaeology. And I went to the board meeting that summer, and I sat down with the executive board, and I showed them a slideshow of what we were in for. I said, time's short, we got to get on it. And so we have started a statewide coastal survey project. It's the first in the nation. We've been doing a lot of work. We've done about 60 miles of the Marin coastline, which is only about half of the public lands. San Diego has started their team. We've had some folks working down in Monterey, and I've been in contact with people all over the nation who are starting to come to grips with how we deal with this. Our species is about to lose its coastal heritage everywhere. Every place that we got on a boat and sailed off over the ocean is about to go underwater. And that's a pretty heavy-duty thought. Now, normally when I give this talk, I've got all those models, and you can see which city is going to get wiped out, and again, it's a sobering affair. But we're not going to do that today. And I'm going to change tack a little bit, because over the intervening years that I've started doing that, I'm not having to make the case that climate change is happening. I'm not having to start from ground zero. I'm going to step in front of that and say, we understand climate change is happening. What do we do about it? And what do we do as citizens about it? Because it's one of the things that constantly comes up in these climate change presentations, that you get the gloom and doom side, and then you get what big oil needs to do or what the president needs to do. But what do we do as citizens? So I'm going to take a step back, and I want to talk about a paper that I read a few years ago. It was by Lowell Bean, and he had written it in the 60s. Actually, it might have been like 69 or 71. And he had gone to a conference, and at that time, the archaeology and anthropology community were really all about hard science, and they didn't see the point in religion. They didn't see the point in ceremony. They saw it as something that was getting in the way of indigenous cultures from maximizing their resource base. I said, well, that doesn't sit well with me. That doesn't sound right to me. And so he went out and he spent some time with the Kuya, which is a group down in Riverside County, down in the Colorado or Sonoran and Mojave Desert area. And he spent a lot of time with them out there. And what he found was that ceremony was deeply embedded in the seasonal round. And so the trail that you took to go to all your seasonal places was in itself its own ceremony and song cycle that you sang. And within that song cycle, it told you when to be there and how much to take, and who your trading partners were, and who the other folks were that you could trade with, and who the ancestors were that you were engaged with, who helped bring those resources into being, and where water was along the way. And you did ceremony at each of these stops as you went all the way around, and found that the religious system of the Kuya was entrenched in everyday life and guided it and actually helped them navigate a pretty treacherous environment that they're in. I mean, that's a hard part of the world to get by on. And I think there's actually a lot of parallels to that. And so what I'm going to do today is that we're going to play with that idea a little bit. And we're actually going to bounce off some work I'm doing with the Tolwa Indians, which is a group up in Del Norte County, very traditional group, salmon fishermen. The Yurok are their neighbors to the south. They extend up into Oregon. And I am working with them right now, their tribal cultural personnel, to build an archaeological research design for habitat restoration. It's not for finding out about people, I don't want to be digging burials or ceremonial roundhouses or any of that sort of stuff. I want to see what was going on with that past environment, how they dealt with environmental shifts in the past, and what does that tell us about how we do habitat restoration today. And as you can imagine, they have a very complex culture, and we're going to I'm going to build it just the littlest chunk of it here, and then we're going to build our chunk of it today, and take a look and see what that looks like. And I'm just going to do 12 rings. That's all I'm going to do, 12 rings. So, of course, I left the papers over there, so hold on for a second. Let me go get those. Okay. So we're going to catch a fish. And we're going to catch one type of fish in particular, which is smelt. It's a little tiny guy. Let's see here. I want me in here. 1, 2, 3. Okay. So I'm just going to hang out right here for a second. Oop. And I have to remember that this should be facing you and not me, because I already know what it says. 1, 2, 3. There's me. And here's the smelt. All right, let's go. Right up here, little buddy. Oh, there we go. Okay. And let's hook these guys up. Now, if I want smelt, I gotta keep an eye out for something, which is I need some help. I need some seabirds, because the only way that you know that the smelt are running is if you are following the seabirds as they go after the smelt. So the seabirds, let's see here. Ooh, seabirds are hanging out here. They are going for the smelt. And I got it backwards again. Let's see, I'm ensuring that no one in cable is going to watch this now. And of course, you or me are watching the seabird. Oh, I anticipated that. Naturally, but of course. And I am going to pull you down here, which I think will make that a little bit easier. Okay. Now, part of that is that you have to have the right coastal conditions, which means, I think I'm going to take this guy right here. The smelt will only use beaches that are gravelly, which is good for you because you need that gravel. And the ladies in the Tolowa tradition, the women collect the gravels, very fine gravels, not very fine, but very smooth, flat gravels, to lay the smelt out on. So they actually build a gravel, smooth top gravel bed to put the smelt on. If you don't have those gravels, you better hope that you've got driftwood, because actually then you don't have anything to dry the smelt out on, which is a tough go. And you get very sandy fish, which nobody likes. Now, if you want the smelt to take home, you're going to need willow, because willow is the basketry material to carry the fish in to take back. And I'm not even getting into the hazel tree that you need for the special equipment to catch the smelt. So you need that. Come on here. You need this. to go with this smelt. I did say you're a guinea pig, right?
Yes.
There's the willow. But of course, the willow you're making basketry out of to carry the smelt. And of course, that's you that has to come over and collect the willow, right? Everybody all right? All right. There we go. Now, to weave willow, you need deer. You need deer long bone. You need one of the, I think it's one of the metacarpals in the front that you fashion into an awl, and that's part of, and the cannon bone also too, part of the forearm, is something good, not forearm, but higher up, which is what you use to weave the willow basketry with. So there's a number of basketry tools that are made out of deer bone. So you need deer. Take this guy, bring him down. It's here, now, I'm still gonna need this, aren't I? Okay. And I'm gonna use this to kind of cinch this out a little bit. Ooh. There's that, okay. Hopefully everybody can see that. Now, the problem about deer though, of course, is that you need obsidian to hunt the deer. So, let's get some obsidian going here. There's our obsidian, which, of course, you need to hunt the deer. But you're in Tolowa country, they don't have any obsidian, which means you have to trade for it. Which means you need a trading partner. I'm going to hang that there. I'm going to hook the obsidian up to this. I'm going to use one of these anchors here so we can kind of start pulling this apart a little bit for us. You're going to see where I'm going to go with all this here in just a little bit. I know this seems kind of crazy, but okay, so there's your trading partner that's connected to the obsidian. That you are trading with. Now, to do that, of course, you need money, which means you've got to make some of that. And I can go into all the shell species that you need. We'll rely on the coastal conditions, which rely on the seabirds that are taking out the mussels and the clam. And you can see I can just keep going with this, right? I'm not going to, I'm going to spare you that. And now, let's drop ceremony in here a little bit and let's see what this looks like. So, you do your trading with your trading partner in times of ceremony, the big times, the big dances, multiple times a year. So you need ceremony with your trading partner. It's you up here, okay? But you need regalia for the ceremony, which is going to be deer. Is there a deer, buddy? Even though he's turned around. Sorry about that. You need shell money for your dance regalia because you have a lot of shell beads as part of that regalia. This is all twisting around here. All right. You need to feed those people, which means your smelt stash is going to get involved. You also are going to need acorn to feed all those folks because you're making acorn mush for everybody. Doop. I'm going to pull this one over. You, of course, are the person catching or collecting the acorn. So you need to be in on that. The health of the acorn, of course, is reliant on, or affects whether or not the deer can eat it. I think you can see, I could just keep going like this all day, right? All these different connections. And you could see how many of these ceremonies woven into, and I could keep going about the ceremony that you would need for collecting willow. We heard about collecting sedge earlier and ceremony with sedge. There's ceremony for every aspect of the landscape that you're going through. And I could pull this out and say, okay, well, you need white deerskin dance, and you need the brush dance, and you have this dance, and you have that dance, and different ceremonies all through the year. They're tied to all these different resources. And then you can go out from your trading partner here and their network of ceremonies. You pull on any one of these guys, and you tug on the whole thing. You don't just come in and rip ceremony out and expect this whole network of stuff to hold together. You don't even take seabirds. I don't even need seabirds. You need the seabird for the smelt. You need the smelt for this whole connection of other things. So this web that's when you hear about people with a food web or the seasonal rounds or how tied the Native American community is with the natural world, this is what they're talking about. Everything really is interconnected. And if you actually sat down and mapped it all out, you would see how tightly connected everything was. And if you yank any one piece of this out, the whole thing suffers greatly. Which is exactly what Western colonists did when they showed up. Ah, who's calling me? How dare you? It's my wife. Just so it was exactly what Western colonists did when they moved in on the Native American community. They made a mess out of this, right? Oh, ceremony, we're not gonna let you do ceremony. We're gonna break your trading partner network up. You don't get access to obsidian anymore. Can you imagine how destructive that was? I mean, now that you actually see this kind of laid out, and if you were to really map out the whole thing, what a mess that was. And what perseverance the Native American community must have had to have survived, to have hung on to the ceremonies that they have been able to hang on to rebuild their culture, to get federally recognized, to fight the federal government, to get their lands back, to reclaim the language. I mean, it's a phenomenal effort, and it's not just here in California. It's happened, we talk about the indigenous communities all over the world. It's happened within indigenous communities all over the world. Them trying to put this back together. All right, keep that in the back of your mind. Do I have time to do one more of these? What time is it? If I don't have time, we could just talk about it. 3:52? Okay, I'm not going to build another one.
Okay, so we have about 10 minutes.
10 minutes, okay. I'm just going to take this apart here and then we'll talk. Now, you can imagine us doing this for something as simple as buying an apple.
Do you want us to take it apart while you talk?
No, that's all right. I'm just going to futz with this enough here. Just enough to get it out of the way so I can stand in front of it without tripping over it. Okay. So, you can imagine us doing this for an apple. You got to go to the store, right? Okay, well, if it's going to have the store, you need refrigeration, which means you need to have electricity, which means you need to have power generating plants, which means you need to have industrial infrastructure to do that. You also need a refrigerator at home, so you have electricity at home and you need to be able to buy it, so you have to go get to work, which means you need to have money, which means you need to have a car. And when you hear the fossil fuel industry talk about this, they say, this is impossible what you're asking. You cannot just go in and rip out fossil fuels out of our economy. They're right. Our economy looks like that, except way more complex. I can run strings all day back and forth, they're right. You don't go in and just rip out fossil fuels. You don't go in and just rip out cars. You don't go in and just rip out any of these things. Perfectly right. That doesn't mean that you're done. That doesn't mean that you walk away from the situation. What you do is you go into each one of these little strands, you follow it from one end to the other. Okay, I have a car. I'm attached to fossil fuels. I got attached to work. I'm attached to this. I'm attached to that. Okay, well, what if I got an electric car? What if I got 100% renewable energy for my house? Do one of these for you, for your house. Do one of these for your business. And follow each one of these out and see what they connect to and say, okay, I can't cut this one, but I can make this one a lot smaller. I recommend people thinking about taking a renewable energy card and putting it in there as a redundant organ to this, and start making the same ties that you do with fossil fuels. That's fine, just make them redundant. Eventually what's going to happen is that those fossil fuel connections are going to atrophy and fall off, right? If everybody's doing this, that means you're putting less pressure on your municipal government setup, your local city or county government, which means they're putting less emphasis on the state infrastructure, which means it's putting less emphasis on the national infrastructure. This is where, a surgeon will come in and remove a bad organ out of you, right? If fossil fuel is a bad organ, they can remove it out of you. The healing is still you. It's still done cell by cell, neuron by neuron, vein by vein. That is us. We are the individual cells. We are the ones that do the healing on the body. I recommend going through doing this and checking it out, because the irony of all this is the rest of the world is asking us to take the same hit that we gave to the indigenous communities of the world. The rest of the world is asking the first world, you need to gut what you're doing right now, change everything, and do it completely differently, because otherwise it's not going to work. This is the new paradigm that you're in, and you need to do it, and you need to do it now. And we are fighting, kicking, and screaming, which is, understandable. Anybody would. But nevertheless, it needs to be done. And here's the thing. We as a species can do it because we've already done it. We've been doing it for 500 years. Indigenous communities have been doing it forever, and they've been doing it successfully. We can do this. And there's plenty of precedent set for how. I think it's ironic that the indigenous community, Nick and I have talked about this quite a bit, the indigenous land management policies are really turning out probably the best land management policies, the controlled burning, limited takes, which species you harvest, which ones you don't, are actually turning out to be better for building resiliency for climate change than the ones we've got in place. So we have a lot of homework to do about how things were 150 years ago, 200 years ago, because that's actually a better setup than what we've allowed to have happen today. So I think with that, and my big mess of a web here, I'm going to put a stop in it because I can go on all day about this. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to entertain them.
Have you read a book called The Death of Prehistory?
The Death of Prehistory?
Yeah.
I have not.
There's a chapter in there written by Kent Lightfoot, and he talks about restorative ecology. And
Right.
So you've heard that, and his whole notion is that when we look at history and we look especially the mission period, how traditionally archaeologists pick, like there was prehistory and then the next day there was history,
right.
and the same thing occurred in the environment.
Right.
So Lightfoot argues that we need to tease that out because archaeologists have the techniques now, and especially including tribes in the discussion, so tribes can help archaeologists pull that all out. And when we talk about restoration or preventing more climate change or whatever, we need to really pick a time when we want to go back and restore too, because things changed over time. So you can't mix those time periods up. So it's not as simple as many people think it is.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this. You want to go back to a time period where people aren't on the landscape, unless you're planning on reintroducing Columbian mammoth and going back to the Pleistocene, doesn't exist. The idea of this, landscape without people on it, it's fiction. There's no way we could do it today if we wanted to go back to when it last happened. And then that's from the science perspective. You know, the tribal point of view is they've always been on the landscape. And that's not even a conversation that a lot of tribal communities can even have. That's not in the framework of their worldview. So you got to get people all back on the landscape. And so how do we do it? You know, we looked at spots, you know, out of Point Reyes where they were clearly village sites, and they are in, you know, 6-8 foot stands of poison oak. It did not look like that when people were there, even though Point Reyes has kept people off of that land and you know, grazing animals and all that stuff for the past 40 years. Didn't look like that. They had it set up completely different. It's the controlled burns. It's harvesting different animals. The elk and the deer runs are different than they are now. It was a different place, and it was well managed. I collected sedge with tribal elders from Dry Creek almost 20 years ago now, and it was a life-changing experience for me to see them going back to the same plants that, you know, their mothers and grandmothers had gone back to. You know, their gardens, how we would view gardens. It's a landscaped terrain. We just don't have. We have to get into a different mindset than what we've got now, a different relationship with nature that looks kind of like this, understands those connections that we have with everything. Yeah.
How do you see, I mean, because I look at the newer generations and I have little kids, and like,
Yeah.
I'm terrified of what technology is going to do to them, and I
Right.
try to like keep it away from them because I feel like, you know, we've disconnected from the natural world for so long now in our modern society, but that's like a whole other stuff and a whole other demon that we have to contend with because everybody's diving into their technology and they're not
Yeah.
present even with other human beings. And
Pokemon's not helping anything.
no, and that's how people connect with
Yeah.
the natural or the world around them now. And that's the part that you know, it's like all of this stuff I think about all the time, and the connectedness and how do we, you know, disentangle ourselves from the messy parts of it. But like, how do we train people's minds to see the world and appreciate the world in a different way when that's like such an addictive thing that's right in front of everyone at all times?
Well, yeah, that's such a great question. I have a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old, and my 5-year-old's adopted from Ethiopia. My wife's Jewish. I don't have a religious background, so how we maneuver all these things for our family, because my Ethiopian daughter is Jewish because her mother's, you know, so the two of them are going to synagogue and getting a religious background, and I'm taking both daughters out into the world to see nature, and we go to the redwood, we go to these different places where we talk about the systems. This is a business plan, right? This is how you put a business together. This is where you're checking your money flows, you're checking who your customer base is, you're checking your IT network. People already know how to think like this. You have to put it to them to think about not just the internal workings of your business, but how you go outside to all your other businesses and who you connect to. And you see a lot in the media how businesses that do. It used to be just nailing a business that had bad business practices. Now you're going to nail the business that has business with the guys that are doing bad business practice. I'm going to hit the college now that is invested in guys that are doing bad business. We're going 2 degrees, 3 degrees separation out, which is part of changing that. I think that the only way to do it, the kids are going to do technology. That is unavoidable. It is everywhere. It is pervasive. There's TV. There you can watch anything you want on your phone. They're going to watch it over to their friend's house. You cannot avoid it. Our job, I think, as parents, is to get them out there. The world will get them caught up on a lot of that technology. Our job is to get them out into the world, out to see these things, to teach them how to use the technology responsibility. If you tell them don't touch it, the only thing they're wanting to do is touch it, right? So you need to, I think you need to sit down with them and walk them through how technology can be used, and what ways can technology be used to improve your lives, and which way is technology wasting your time, and what else can you get from being out in the world.
I guess my question is more because, like, I'm doing that with my kids, you know, and people around me that I know. But how does the greater society, as we, like, you know, what we need to do in order to try to get, you know, conservation and reversal of our bad practices so we can survive as a species. Like, but this huge forceful momentum is going ahead and making it impossible to slow it down. Like, how do we do that?
Yeah, one of the Exxon CEOs said a few years ago that as a species, we've adapted to climate change before. We'll adapt to it now. So I'm paraphrasing, but that's essentially what he's saying. Well, here's the thing: we didn't, right? Most of the species did not adapt to climate change. They died, is what happened. The dustbins of history are littered with the cultures that failed to make the transition and past climatic events. We have is people that have survived because they had a pre-existing set of conditions. Their water sources were deep, they went way up in the mountains, and you had good runs of fish. We can go through it and go around the world to find all the conditions that these groups of people that survived. We have a couple things going for us right now. One is that we know what the causes are. We understand those causes. We've never understood those causes before. And the causes are coming from us, right? They're anthropogenic. And so we are directly tied to that. So that's something that's in our favor. Two, for the first time in the history of our species, we could all talk to each other. Three, for the first time in the history of our species, we have the scientific knowledge to come up with solutions that might be able to pull us away from this. So what I spend a lot of time, and Sally's probably seen it, and Nick's seen it a couple of times too, is I talk about these past events and what gloom and doom they were. But really, if we look forward, we have some things going for us that we've never had before. And I'm sitting here talking to a group of people, and I'm assuming I'm not having to make the change that climate change is, the argument that climate change is real. That's great. That wasn't the case 10 years ago. That's some of the progress you're looking for. That we're starting to talk about how to fix it, not is this even happening. The trajectory for climate change started, probably in the early 1800s. Geologically, that's nothing. This was a done deal by the early 1900s, right? We were already way on down the road of fossil fuels. We're trying to turn a massive boat around in a period of 100 years. That's unheard of. I mean, this is crazy. But we are, I think, making progress on it.
I'm so glad you brought up adaptation, because that was my next question. And that is, a lot of times we find the notion of adaptation kind of coming forward into these climate action plans that are being written for different municipalities. Like I've written some for Marin Climate Energy Partnership, and so they've said, okay, you're the archaeologist, can you write in the adaptation section about archaeology, or they call in a biologist, can you write how our biology, how archaeology is adapting to climate change? And I always end up scratching my head, because I'm like, well, is that the story we really want to talk about? Are we really saying that we're adapting at this point? Or can we notice that it's a crisis, acknowledge that it's a crisis, and come up with solutions just like you laid out here on everything is interconnected? And yes, some things we may be adapting to, but some things we're not going to adapt to. And some things we're going to find solutions for, because everything is connected. There's a synergy there. And so that's a hard thing when you're working within the government, because they kind of want to, smooth things out and not be challenged, particularly in the light of climate change.
Well, yeah, I think that's exactly right. And so for our coastal surveys, we're using a 6-foot sea level rise model, which I encourage you, if you've never done it before, go to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration website. They have a sea level rise projector, online projector, and you can go block by block, mile by mile, neighborhood by neighborhood, up and down the coast, and see what different sea level rise impacts would look like. They've chosen 6 feet. The IPCC chooses 3 to 4 feet, depending on which year it is. The state government was choosing 5 feet for a while. I'm working with a group down in Southern California. They've chosen 30 feet. The National Parks and the Water team in Florida is using 15 feet.
And what time frame?
By 2100. What's that? Yeah, see, there you go. So, and talking to some agency officials who will remain nameless about this, that 5 to 6 feet ratio or numbers generally picked because it's the general assumption that that's what the federal government could afford to deal with. What we're actually adapting to is a moving target, and because it's a moving target, you have all these people undermining those efforts because we don't know what we're doing, we don't know what we're aiming for. Well, you know, we can pick a point and head towards it for sure. I'd rather head for a 6 foot and end up being 3 feet, but then we've done a lot of work towards building infrastructure. And if it ends up being 30 feet, then at least we got the 6 feet documented. The point is to get started. Mm-hmm. And for me, that habitat restoration, that building resiliency, it's, yes, it's a form of adaptation. We're trying to get out in front of it and trying to set the environment up so it's better to take those hits. But there can be nothing wrong with going through Salmon Creek and restoring that entire drainage system so that salmon can go up and down it. And you've got good habitat back in there and standing, you know, conifer groves that provide the shade for the salmon. Everything that we keep talking about, and you've seen this, you see this all the time in the media, everything that we're talking about, we really should be doing anyways. There's no reason not to be doing it. It's only going to make things better by us doing it.
So I think we may have time for one more question if anyone has another question at all.
Yeah, I'll go all day.
Sorry to cut you off, but
We'll open it up at the end.
Yeah,
too,
definitely.
For Q&A for both of our speakers. We want to hear another point of view.
Can't resist, Mike.
okay, the next got one more question. And then
So the
Great.
tribe you're working with to document this web in a variety of ways for them.
Right.
So I don't know how far you are along that path, but have they begun to look at ways to intervene in the climate change in all its forms to try and mitigate some of the impacts on their culture?
Where we are with that right now is the funding is focused on two very small watersheds, and how to repair those two very small watersheds. However, by opening those discussions, what comes out of it is, what do we do with all the watersheds that are of this same size along this coastline? And what do the archaeological sites in the front of these watersheds tell us? Like the fact that this little tiny watershed still had trout and salmon going up it, and these aren't slated for salmon and trout habitat restoration, but clearly they're there because there they are on the record, right? And we've got elders talking about pulling salmon out of that stream in 1910. Okay, now we need to rearrange the national parks habitation restoration schedule to include these things in their habitat restoration agenda. So it's little bites, right? But hopefully, and it also is a pilot program for national parks. Where I want us to end up is for us to take on the Klamath River and the Smith River and the Russian River, and talking about long-term strategies for restoring the whole watershed so that all the communities along it can benefit and restore, you know, tribal ethnobotanical resources and fishing rights and everything else that comes along with that. So baby steps, baby steps.
Great.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Wonderful.
Who's our next speaker?
Over. Gives me great pleasure to introduce this next individual. Actually, 34, 35 years ago, he and I used to walk out here. He was obviously just a young man, but that was where we began, and for years we walked here. And it's really fascinating now that we come back here 30 plus years later. He's a Novato City Councilman. I'm president of the board. This is really a wonderful homecoming for both of us. We love this park, and we're so glad to be associated with it. Now, in addition to that, Josh's done quite a few number of things in his life. I know of many of them. I don't know of all of them. He snuck around behind me and did a bunch of other stuff, but that was great. He was a JAG attorney, was stationed in Japan. This is an interesting story that we went through. So he writes one night and says, made it through the earthquake waiting for the tsunami. And then we hear nothing. Of course, then we watch the news and you see what happened with Fukushima, everything else. Absolute total devastation. So the next morning at 6 a.m. our time, I was on the phone calling JAG headquarters, which happened to be in the Pentagon. It's really atypical. I think they were surprised to hear from me as I was to be calling them. But I called him and said, here's the situation. This is the email we got. We have no idea what happened. Can you tell us? And he was there with his current wife. They called back much later in the day. I'll get back to that in a second. But we finally heard from Molly, and they made it to base. Everything's fine. Josh got Molly immediately out to Okinawa. That was the weekend they were going to call us, and due to the fact that anyone who had young children or was pregnant, they needed to leave that island, not Okinawa. So Josh got her down to Okinawa. They were going to call us and let us know that Molly was pregnant, my first grandchild. So she got out of there. He stayed. She came back, let things calm down. There was radiation that went over their entire base. And that is one of the keys that is establishing this term, anthropogenic. Everything that goes on now has a human influence on it. And it wasn't the first couple of nuclear bombs that happened, but when the mass began to happen, you can go around the Earth and find radiation everywhere. Terribly unfortunate, but it's all from human influence. So we're looking at all of that. And there's some people who are working a lot on it. One of the other things that Josh does is he has been Chief Operations Officer of Next Gen Climate. And that's one of the primary environmental organizations. He can tell you more about it. Dealing with bold action to stop what is going on with our activities and to change our direction. And I'll echo Mike's point. I don't think I'm talking to any climate deniers here, but they are all over the country. And some of what Josh will talk to us about is a little bit about what other people are doing to fight and to stop this. But we can't. We have to move forward. We have to change our culture. We have to change our technology. So, Josh, you can say a few more things about yourself. But we're real proud of you. Here he is, Novato City Councilman Josh Fryday.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dad. And I hope you didn't scare everyone with that story. Everyone is safe. My son glows in the dark, but he's fine otherwise. Other than that, really exciting to be here on this beautiful day, and thank you all for coming out. I am wearing a few different hats as part of this conversation. One is of Doug Fryday's son, president of this board and of this great organization. The other is of someone who works at Next Gen Climate, which was founded by Tom Steyer, focused on changing the politics of climate change in our country, both locally and nationally, and has been fighting for the last several years on the front of this fight. And then also as a Novato City Councilman. And I think it would be a severe understatement to say what a great treasure this park is and this museum is to our entire community. And it services not just the people of Novato, but the entire Bay Area to really preserve the cultural history. And if you walk through the museum, you see that what the people, the Miwok people and other indigenous people of this region left us with our beautiful hills and our beautiful skies over the last several thousands of years is an incredible legacy. They left us a legacy of this beautiful planet where we still have creeks and parks to walk through and mountains. And this issue, to me and to many of us who are here, climate change is about what's going to be our legacy. And what kind of legacy are we going to leave our children and our grandchildren? Will we have museums thousands of years from now and beautiful parks with children running with clean water and clean air? And that's an open question right now. So I think what we wanted to talk about today is what some of the progress that has been made, and then where we can go, what are some of the challenges that still exist, and then where do we need to go politically and I think as a country. And then so I'm going to keep this somewhat short and then want to open it up to questions to really make this a conversation. I want to thank Mike again for really a wonderful presentation, and I feel very inferior with zero props or visualizations up here. But was delivered. It worked. So it was a wonderful, really wonderful description of what is happening and what's at stake. And your theme of interconnectedness and connectedness, I think that you drove home so perfectly. I think you'll see a rise as a theme in what I think is going to be the solution for really overcoming this challenge politically in this country. So To talk about to the beginning, some of the progress. We talked about some of the progress was made even from 35 years ago when my father started thinking about climate change, and 10 years ago when the debate was really about the science. We have made enormous change. When I came out of the Navy and started working with Next Gen Climate, we were coming off a presidential election in 2012 where neither candidate said the word climate change at any point throughout the campaign. None of the debates talked about climate change, and our current president, who has been a hero on climate change since being elected, but in the 2012 campaign had an all-of-the-above energy strategy, which included coal and, just as it sounds, all of the above. And if you fast forward 4 years in just a very, very short time period, I just came back from Philadelphia where we had the Democratic National Convention, and the party passed the single most progressive and aggressive party platform on climate change in our history, and environmental, you could argue, where we have a party and Hillary Clinton and our national party now calling to get us to 100% clean energy, and push for a whole slew of other solutions. So in just a short amount of time, we have seen enormous progress. Now, we're obviously not there yet, and we have a big fight ahead of us, but we have seen. So I want to talk about what brought us, I think, to this point, what I think allowed us to have this progress, and then where do we need to go to make sure the progress continues. So what did it take? I think first and foremost, unlike the culture and history of, I think, so many of the Native American and indigenous people that we're here celebrating today, where it is ingrained, and respecting the earth and respecting nature and feeling connected is ingrained in culture and is ingrained in how you raise your children. We find ourselves right now where we're in a fight, where we have to fight to change the culture and bring some of that back. And the first part of that fight, at least in America, was engaging in politics. And I think that that's something new that a lot of environmental groups weren't doing as aggressively. Certainly my boss, Tom Steyer, didn't feel that we were doing as aggressively as we needed to. And so he and many others decided after the 2012 election that it was time to engage in political campaigns in a very real way. And so his first big fight was fighting the Keystone Pipeline, which many of you may have heard, where there's a proposal to have a Keystone pipeline that is connected to the tar sands in Canada, come through America, and produce oil that got exported out through the Gulf Coast. And he and several others said that, no, we're not going to allow that to happen. We're not going to sit by and watch as we continue to create infrastructure that embeds a fossil fuel economy. So we took on the Keystone Pipeline, which was a huge political fight, and we stood up to the president, and we organized people around the country, and we gave voice to landowners and ranchers and people who were going to have the pipeline go through their backyard. And eventually, after several years, we won. And it was a huge victory, but it took really engaging at all levels of government, local, state, and national, to do it. We also started engaging in political campaigns. In 2014, or back to 2012, the entire environmental community, so all the groups that you've heard of, Sierra Club, League of Conservation Voters, the entire environmental community in 2012 spent $20 million in the presidential election, which is a big election. Now, $20 million sounds like a lot of money. It is a lot of money. In a presidential election, in a campaign, it's not a lot of money. And Tom Steyer and our organization started to change that in 2014. He alone spent $75 million, and the entire environmental community total spent over $100 million in the campaign trying to elect climate champions to support people who are willing to stand up and say climate change is an issue, and we're gonna pursue solutions to get there. So what you saw is real engagement in the political process. And if you look at the dramatic change from 2012 to what we just saw in Philadelphia this past week with Hillary Clinton and the Democratic Party, there's a real change. And we see all over the country candidates now coming out and supporting, saying climate change, one, is real, so we're not having a debate about science, and we're going to push real solutions to solve this. Now, we obviously aren't where we need to be, right? We have a party in our country, the other majority party, or other major party, who isn't where we need them to be, but this is why this is a fight, and this is why we need to stay engaged and keep pushing. The second thing I think we did that was critical to getting us to where we are today, and is going to be even more important moving forward, is to build a broader coalition. So we believe, and I believe strongly, that this is not a environmental issue we're talking about. This is a human issue. This is very much about how our children, our grandchildren, and how this affects each and every one of us. And it was important for us, and we believe in the political environment, to make this a human issue and make this not an environmental issue. And so we've worked very hard, and a lot of other people have worked hard as well, to really broaden the coalition of people who are talking about this issue, right? And people who see this as their issue, even if they don't think of themselves as an environmentalist, even if they don't think of themselves as someone who wakes up thinking about the planet, but seeing that this issue is about their lives, and this issue is about their children's lives. And so we focused very hard on that, and we've built some really incredible coalitions along the way. One of the ones that we're most proud of is working with organized labor throughout the country, and getting people who have generally long focused on economic issues and workers' rights and economics rights, but have enormous power in our political system, and working very closely with them to see, for them to see, and for us to see as well, that this is all one issue. Economic justice and environmental justice are two issues of the same coin, two sides of the same coin, right? So if you're worried about how do you pay for health care, and if you're worried about how are you going to get to your job, if you're sick because of the power plant that's in your backyard that's polluting the water that your children are drinking and the water that you're drinking, if you're worried about those issues, you can't get to work. You won't be able to pay for your health care. So these issues are very, very connected. And it was important, and it took a lot of work for people to start to see how they are connected. And I think we're starting to see we're starting to turn a corner and reach a tipping point on this. And I'll give you just a couple of quick examples. One of the campaigns that we've launched this year is a large field program effort around the country in 7 battleground states with the largest unions in the country. And this is going to be upwards of a $50 million program, knocking on doors and talking to people about the interconnection of economic justice and environmental justice, and getting people to the polls based on that platform. And that's something that is very new, but it's very exciting. And we think it has a lot of potential. A couple of the other groups that we've worked with are communities of color. Communities of color, if you look at the polling across the board, and we do a lot of polling, and there's a lot of polling out there, the people most concerned in this country about climate change and take it most seriously, number 1, Latinos. Number 2, African Americans. Number 3, Asians. And then number 4, Caucasians. Counterintuitive to many people, but we really have seen that it's because these issues affect communities of color first, and there's a deep awareness in those communities of the interconnectedness of these issues and respect for the planet. And working with those communities has been essential, I think, to a lot of the progress we've made, where it's not just one face or one type of people talking about the importance of this, but we have a diverse group of people pushing this issue and talking about how important this is. We've also reached out to some folks who you might think of as non-traditional allies in environmental fights. The business community. For those of you who followed Paris closely and COP21 and all the international agreements, the folks that were front and center pushing the hardest were large businesses who understand the risk that climate change brings to their bottom line, and the risk that these issues have to their ability to operate successful businesses. So some of the biggest buyers of renewable energy in this country are our big businesses, Walmart, Microsoft, who really get the need to transition to clean energy, and also understand the risk associated to their businesses if we don't get on top of this. The faith community, who is the number one proponent that we have around the world for climate change? Does anyone know? The Pope. Yeah, close. Pope Francis. Pope Francis is Pope Francis last year in his encyclical, and if you haven't had a chance to read his encyclical, highly recommend it. A beautifully, beautifully written document talking about the need to take care of poor people and why we need to address climate change. And he has done an enormous amount of good and has allowed us to go into different communities and religious communities around the country and talk about the importance of this issue and really activate people and talk about the morality. We spoke earlier about how this has become a moral and a spiritual issue, and we now have voices out there who have a lot of credibility, who are amplifying and providing credence to the truth that this is a moral issue. And this has everything to do with what kind of world we're going to leave our children. And then one of my favorite constituencies that has also been activated over the last several years, and this is new, is the United States military. The Navy, and I say this proudly because I was in the Navy, the Navy has been leading the effort to green our fleet and to make sure that we get off fossil fuels. The federal government is our biggest user of oil and fossil fuels in the country. The Navy and our military has been leading the effort because they recognize that this is about saving lives, that the ability to get off oil, the ability to not have to transport oil in war zones is about saving lives. And they've also, we realized, and I saw this, from ships, the catastrophes when the catastrophes that are going to be caused by global warming and climate change is going to create enormous instability around the world, enormous migration, refugees, talking about in the millions, are going to be forced to flee and go into other countries, which is going to create enormous geopolitical instability around the world. Well, guess who shoulders the burden of that instability? The United States Navy and the United States Marine Corps and the United States Air Force, the United States Army. It's the military. So our military leaders have really stepped up, and the Pentagon has said climate change is an issue of national security. Now that's a profound thing to say. 10 years ago, you did not have our military leaders saying that. So to be able to have a coalition where we have organized labor, communities of color, business leaders, military leaders, and several others in our communities around the country talking about this issue is incredibly powerful and makes it real, and I think goes to the interconnectedness that we were talking about earlier. And I think we're starting to see people understand this as an interconnected issue. I'll give you one other quick anecdote and then move on. I was talking with a labor organizer, a very powerful labor organizer in California last week, who said her membership, one of the biggest unions in California, her membership, when they got polled about what are your three most important issues, the three most important issues were wages, which would seem obvious, economic justice, racial justice in our criminal justice system is number 2, and then number 3 was the environment. And to them, the environment was as critical as wages, and it was as critical as any other issue in their community, because it's affecting their children, because it's their communities that we have to now carry and truck in water because of our drought, and they don't have any clean water in their communities. It's their communities where their kids are twice as likely to have asthma as kids that grow up in Marin. And so it's those communities that really feel this issue, and if we can activate those communities and we can give voice to those communities, which is what we're trying to do in our campaigns, we think we're going to have a lot of success continuing to push this issue. A couple other quick things that we've done is we've empowered young people. So we just put out a poll last week, 75% of young people in battleground states, so these are not kids coming from Marin or from Berkeley, these are battleground states, 75% of young kids, or young people aged 18 to 35, are more likely to vote for a presidential candidate who wants to transition us to a clean energy economy. So they are making political decisions based on who is going to be good on climate change and who is going to move us to a clean energy economy. That's incredibly powerful. Now, our job, and the reason that we're running a $25 million campaign to knock on doors and organize campuses on over 200 campuses around the country, our job is to make sure they actually engage in the political process. And that's all of your job as well. So talk to your kids, talk to your grandkids, talk to your friends in other states and get them to vote. But if they vote, they're going to vote on this issue. This is the number one issue to young people in this election. And the reason that that's relevant is our millennials now make up the biggest voting bloc in our country. So there are more millennial voters or potential voters than there are baby boomers in our country. So this is a voting bloc that has enormous potential political power and believes this issue is the top issue in this election. So the potential there, the opportunity is there. The question is, will we be able to capitalize on that? But empowering young people, giving voice to young people has been a huge part of the progress that we've made, and also what we think is going to be the solution for moving forward. And then I would say the last place that that I think has, or that's the reason I think we can give some credit to why we've seen such progress, relates to the theme or the title of this whole program, which is Mother Nature Speaks. And Tom likes to always say that Mother Nature has a voice in all of this. And if we look at the fact that every month this year has been the hottest month on record, and if we look at what is happening with the California drought and drought around the country, if we look at the speed with which our ice caps are melting, if we look at what is happening in Florida, where the streets are literally flooded on a regular basis, Mother Nature is speaking to us. And she has a very powerful voice, and her voice, unfortunately, has become stronger and stronger and stronger over the last several years. And as the impacts of climate change, as the impacts of what is happening to our planet become more real and more real for people, their desire to engage in the political process, their desire to find solutions, and their desire to fix this obviously becomes more intense. Then the question is how quickly or intently are we going to listen to her? And that's a TBD question that we all have to answer for ourselves. But she is speaking, and she's speaking loudly, and it's very obvious what she's saying if you just look at the science and you look at the urgency of this issue. So what are some of the challenges, just quickly to sum up, that we have? We have a broken political system. So we're in a country where over 80% of people believe that not only is climate change real, but it's caused by humans. 72% of Republicans and conservatives want to transition to a clean energy economy. So we have a country where we've won this fight in the minds of the vast majority of the American public. And yet we have a political system that is not responding to where the people want to be. And that's something that we have to fix. And that's why we're engaged in real hard fights like we are with this election. That's why this election is so critical. And that's to put the right people in place. And so we have to really keep fighting, keep pushing. The other thing we have to do, I think, is recognize that these solutions, the only solutions, are not going to be at the federal level. And they're not. And I was just in D.C. meeting with members of Congress last week on the Hill. And even if we win this election, which is critical that we do, there's a lot we can do. Everything that we need to do to solve this crisis, it cannot be done by Congress, cannot be done at the federal level. We're just not going to get there. That's the way our system works, the speed with which it works, and some of the barriers. So what does that mean? That means states and cities and other governments and local organizations have to step up. And a lot of them are in a very real way. So we have groups like the Sierra Club is running a 100% clean cities campaign, where cities across the country are signing up to commit to getting to 100% clean energy. San Diego and California already has, and other cities are getting there. Here in Nevada, we've taken several measures to lead on this issue. We've changed most of our light bulbs to LED. We have several electric vehicle stations that we've placed all around the city. We've put solar panels up on most of our schools. Are going to be up this summer. We're putting them up in neighborhoods. So the cities and states are really stepping up in a big way, and that needs to continue. And I think that's where all of you come in. When we talk about solutions, what solutions, what can you do as citizens or as individuals, in addition to making changes in your own life? You need to be the one showing up to your local government saying, we need more solar. We need to be changing the way we produce and we buy energy in our communities. We need to change the way we provide food, and organic and sustainable food for our children in our communities. And you need to be pressuring and telling your elected officials that you expect them to do it and demand that they do it. And that's the role that you can play. And my feeling is, my experience is, our leaders will respond if they're open to. And the truth is that if they don't respond, Mother Nature is going to continue to speak louder and louder until we do. So where we go from here, I am actually very optimistic about being able to solve this issue and about being able to move forward. Americans want clean energy. It's a question of time, and will we get there? Will we get there fast enough? So the last thing I'll say is it's important for us, I think, to stay positive in this issue. And when we talk about the crisis and what we're facing, and when we talk to people about why they should engage on it, it's because every single human being wants clean water for their children. Every single human being wants to be able to breathe clean air. No matter where you come from or who you are, you want to be able to breathe clean air. And every single person wants to have a good job in this economy. And if we address climate change, if we actually take this issue on in a serious way, we'll be able to create millions of jobs throughout the country. We'll be able to clean up our environment, and we'll be able to make sure that our children, our grandchildren, have places like Miwok Park to be in the rest of their life. So I'm very optimistic about where we're going. It's going to be a big fight, but I think if we remain positive and we continue to talk to people about how this affects their lives in a very real way, and the potential for a cleaner, safer world with a better economy, then we're gonna beat this. Thank you.
Josh, you can do your question.
Okay.
Okay, I just have to say that you left out an important group in terms of ethnic groups.
Sure.
And I think if you ask Native Americans, you would find that the majority of them are very concerned because the relationship with Mother Earth is so immediate and continuing. We're not as separated in terms of our ceremonies and in terms of our beliefs. And so I would have put them right up at the top.
Yes, thank you for pointing that out. I think I would agree with you 100%, and that's sort of a problem of political polling about what groups get talked to. But you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. No, and thank you for pointing that out. That's a very important point. Yes, sir.
Actually, I want to comment on that because in some of the Native American groups that I work with, the climate change issue is actually still out for some of them. There are, in some of the tribal communities I'm with, some of the elders are politically conservative, and they actually don't feel that climate change is happening, even though some of the younger folks who are out fishing for the salmon and stuff like that, they've seen the changes in the beach dynamics and stuff like that. So I'm actually having to go up to some of the tribal communities to go to council to actually make the case that climate change is happening and how we know it and why. And it's a profoundly complicated thing for a lot of the tribal communities that I've been engaged with. So I think there are some very strong Native voices in there that climate change is happening, and a lot of proof, but it isn't unanimous, which surprised me because I would have thought that it would have been.
I would say that my experience is that a lot of tribal elders are being included in a lot of the environmental forums, you know, on the big stage. They're saying, well, you guys lived here for thousands of years and the land was pristine. We need to look to you for some of your wisdom about your relationship with the earth. So my experience has been the other way.
Wasn't it Keystone? The natives were heavily involved in stopping.
Going through the reservation?
Absolutely.
I've got a question.
Sure.
Can you talk about the insurance industries and their role in preparing for climate change? Because I think that's a pretty big. You'll know that sector more than I will.
That's good. So if you didn't hear the question, was about insurance industries, and this is back to the point where that business and the private sector in many ways is going to play a huge role in actually us solving this. I remember taking a class in law school almost 10 years ago where insurance industries were already starting to put this into their calculations, this issue, because they know what the risks are and what the costs are. And right now, Congress, for an example, and I'll get to your question specifically, but Congress, for instance, is about to grapple with, and this goes also to the adaptation questions that were talked about earlier, grapple with what do we do about flood insurance in certain parts of the country, and how do we provide flood insurance at an inexpensive rate for people, because floods are becoming increasingly more common and they're becoming increasingly more intense and dangerous. around the country, and it's a huge policy question that Congress right now is grappling about. What do they do about flood insurance? Because more and more insurance companies are looking at that and saying, I'm not sure we want to provide flood insurance, right? If you want to live there, it's not worth it for us to provide flood insurance from a pure business economic standpoint from their point of view. So they're really interesting debates around this. I will say Dave Jones, who is the insurance commissioner for the state of California, is spending an enormous amount of time on this issue. Because from his perspective, the insurance companies play a huge role in our ability to focus on this, not just from the underwriting perspective, because that's a piece of it, but from the investment perspective. So insurance companies take our money and they invest a ton of it in different places, and allowing them or forcing them or encouraging them, however you want to say it, to invest in smart ways that don't continue to invest in a fossil fuel economy would have a really big impact in terms of changing the market for renewable energies. So it's a really great question. I think it still remains to be seen what exactly we're going to see in terms of from consumers. One of the worries that I have is that insurance companies are already starting to put the costs of climate change into their pricing. And so if you live in certain parts of California, fire insurance is either going to be exorbitant, or it's going to be starting to not even be offered in some places. But my worry is that they're already starting to put the costs in. But the old proverb of frog doesn't jump out of water that's being warmed up, but it'll jump out of boiling water. As consumers, we're seeing incremental costs go up and up and up that are directly related, but it's not happening fast enough for us to react. And my worry is that if insurance companies, say, really started to put in the cost for what climate change is going to be 20 years from now, you would all wake up tomorrow and there'd be a revolution. But if we have incremental costs along the way because of floods and fires and other costs, I just worry that we as consumers aren't going to act fast enough. But it's a great question, because it's a really it's going to be something that we should all be paying attention and will be paying attention to. Yes, ma'am.
Do you know what's happening with the giant fossil fuel companies like Exxon and Chevron, and are they actually orienting themselves toward clean energy, or is it just a front?
That's a good question. So the question is, what are the big oil companies or the big fossil fuel companies like Exxon and others doing on this issue, and how are they responding to this issue? The answer is they're not responding responsibly enough, in our opinion. Last year, when there was SB 350, which was a huge climate legislation that the state legislature in California and the governor was trying to push through, the single biggest lobbyist in the state of California was the petroleum industry. So they are not going down without a fight on this issue at all, which is unfortunate, because we see enormous opportunity economically and otherwise to start to transition to renewable energy. And if they're really energy companies, not just oil companies, if they're energy companies, they would see that opportunity and take it. What we do see, interestingly enough, is Exxon. I think the CEO of Exxon and a couple other international energy leaders have started to say that they are interested in talking about a carbon tax, because they sort of see the writing on the wall. They see that there's going to be a need to price carbon at some level. And what we think is that they want to get ahead of it before the regulation comes down on them from the top down. They want to be at the table saying, we support this, but let's talk about what the price on carbon is, what the actual mechanism is. And obviously there's concerns there, right? If they're writing the rules for what a carbon tax or a cap and trade system or another price on carbon looks like, it's probably going to be more favorable to them than what we need for the environment. So we do see them responding, but the question is not fast enough. That's why shareholders play a big role in this and pushing the companies at the investor level, and then also elections. If Hillary wins as being a clear champion of climate and her opponent is not, and if other candidates around the country start to win who are climate champions and their opponents are not, these companies, they understand politics and they understand business. They'll change their practices if they see the politics changing.
I can share with you about the flood insurance issue. because I'm in one. Flood insurance is federally regulated, unlike other insurance plans, and it's increasingly going up. In addition to that, all the flood zones have been expanded to now require any homeowner in those areas to have the federally mandated flood insurance. And it's like 25% more people in Marin have to have flood insurance that didn't have to have it 3 years ago. But in Marin, one of the differences is Marin County was able to work and get a grant from FEMA, and 80 people in Marin have applied for a grant to raise their houses, and FEMA will be paying 75% of the cost, anticipating the expense to have the flood would far exceed the millions of dollars they're going to put into houses to raise them. So that seems to be a better solution than everyone having independent fire insurance, which is another catastrophic issue. But obviously someone's got the global warming plan because the flood districts keep expanding.
Yeah, like I said, Congress recognizes what's happening and recognizes that floods are getting worse. Certain people and certain parties won't necessarily attribute it to climate change or human-caused climate change, but they obviously are seeing their constituents being affected in a very real way by floods more and more, and are responding. And this, I think it's going to be, I'm sort of thinking out loud here, but this is going to be a bigger part of our national debate, which is, is flood insurance subsidized by the American taxpayer while we continue to pursue policies that are bad for climate change, something that the American public wants to do. I mean, these are debates that are going to happen more and more, I think, around the country.
I don't know if anybody else has seen this movie, and it kind of brings this to my mind, is Cowspiracy. Have you ever seen that? Anybody ever seen that? Yeah. It's worth watching.
What is it? What's it called?
It's called Cowspiracy, and it brings up the issue of agriculture and the meat industry and their impacts on climate change. How much of a part of the discussion do you feel like that really is? Because it's almost equal to the fossil fuels as an issue, and it's rarely ever brought up.
That's true. It's a huge part of the issue, our agriculture system, which is a big problem and a huge contributor to climate change. So it is certainly part of the dialogue. I agree it is not as widely discussed as some of the other issues, and I don't totally understand why. Some of it has to do with the politics of the issue. I think Democrats have come around to being huge proponents of clean energy. And seeing the economic benefits of that and environmental benefits, but our agriculture system's still tough in a lot of rural places. So I think it's got caught up in politics, but the point is absolutely right, that our agriculture system has to change. It's unsustainable, and right now it's a huge contributor to greenhouse gases. So more and more that needs to be part of the topic, and that may be a perfect example of where citizens at the local level and local governments and state governments are going to probably react a lot faster in creating sustainable food systems than a large centralized federal government.
There's a lawsuit that is just going on somewhere in the Midwest. I just saw the article. I don't remember the states or whatnot, but counties are suing some of the big agribusiness, and it all has to do with pollution of the water systems. Because the runoffs are causing major problems. And so not only is it politics, but it's going to be money. And they were talking about all ag business is now really seriously following that case because it's being allowed to go through the court system. So if they do win, these counties win, and it does slam the agribusiness, that's going to change things as well.
There's also some grassroots efforts going on with carbon sequestering, like even out here in West Marin, John Wick is involved in a big project there, and there's some projects happening in the Midwest.
Yeah, it's called the Carbon Project.
The Carbon Project.
Yeah. There's a lot of great things happening.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
Just one thing, because it goes with Mike's web thing, because you talked about the military and they're being aware of climate change, but say that the Navy are doing the sonar testing that's killing whales, and it's all part of the web. The food chain and what's happening in the ocean and the health of the ocean, and it's hard to isolate it that this is fixing this one thing. Like, we got to stop doing things that's harmful to nature and man and animals. And
Yeah. I didn't say they get everything right. All right, well, thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
wonderful.
Thank you, Josh. That was great. You can see why I'm a little bit proud. He's doing great stuff for the country. I couldn't be happier. So, Robert, would you like to come on up? Okay. This is a man who is past president of the museum. He is now a trustee. He has a wonderful, wonderful closing song, drum thing that we have had him before do it. It is so spectacular, and it will help us end this, and we will end on a much better note than we began. And even though we started late, we're going to finish on time. How exciting.
As I said earlier, we're all connected. And I also believe, like everything in the world is energy. This tree is energy, those plants are energy, you and I are energy, but we're just in different forms, in different degrees. So, since we all are connected, and if my thoughts are negative thoughts, who are they affecting? Not only me, but all of you. So be aware of what your thoughts are, because thought is energy. And if we're thinking positive things, good things, things that we're proud of, that is where we're going to be creating in our universe. If we're thinking negative thoughts and thoughts of hate or whatever else that might be negative, that's what we're going to be creating in the world. I hope all of you begin to really think in a positive way every day of your life. Be aware of what your thoughts are. I'm not perfect. I still have those thoughts sometimes that are not great, but I continue to work to always be positive about what I'm thinking and what I think about other people and what is happening in the world. Be aware of what you're thinking and feeling now. And when I get through playing the drum, I want to sing a song. I'm a member of the Federated Indians of Great Rancheria, and we're made up of Coast Miwok and Southern Pomo. And I'm going to be singing a Pomo song that years ago was developed when some of the Pomo men went off to war as protection for them. The one woman who didn't participate, son, did not come back from the war. That's how powerful a song is. That's how powerful words are. That's how powerful we can be. So, if you allow me, I think we'd be glad to sing this song for you. And be singing in that spirit is here and protect this museum in this land for many, 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 many years to come. Here's the clapper that they use, almost use when they do ceremony and sing songs. As the gentleman said, there's songs for everything. There's songs for fish, there's songs for the plants, there's songs for all foods, every animal. So, and I just want to let you know, when I get hot like this, it's because I've studied healing for over 30 years, natural healing, shamanic healing. And when I get hot like this, that means universal energy, spirit or God or whatever you might want to call it, is coming in. And that healing energy is going out to whoever I'm around. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh.
Everybody like the event? Should we do it again next year? Keep building on this? Let's do it. A couple of events coming up. One is we have a new exhibit. And I think we're holding upstairs open for at least a few minutes so you can look, because the current exhibit ends tonight about 7 o'clock. 6 o'clock. So you got to rush out of here, get upstairs, look at that wonderful exhibit. Here, I'll let you pass this around, is the new one, and this opens August 15th. And our next event after that is our annual fundraiser, which is September 17th. We will have a movie that is coming up in October. What's it? Some time? Walk Through Time. Wonderful documentary, and I think we're going to have popcorn there too. We're not sure yet. So I'm going to pass these out. These are if you want to become a member or something else to go home with. Here it is. And then please keep in mind that next May, I think it's 13th or 14th, we will have our huge birthday party because we're going to be 50 years old, which is phenomenal for your museum. And we're so pleased and proud of all this. So thank you so much for coming and supporting this, and we'll love to see you next time. Okay?